So today's video is going to be about a topic I have been asked to do, well, by many of you out there, and that is to talk about how I stay comfortable and pain-free while traveling 50 to 60 days on the road. And I mean, I am 65 years old, so I'm no spring chicken. There is, of course, going to be a few aches and pains as part of life, but for the most part, I am able to stay very comfortable while traveling. Before we begin, let me say that I understand that what works for one person doesn't necessarily work for another. Everybody has to find what works for you. However, we do share the same basic biology and biomechanical structure, so there are some things that we can look at and say, you know, these are good or these are bad for the majority of the population. So I'm going to approach this video in two ways. One, as a guy who's done his good share of riding long distances over a long period of time, and also as a chiropractor. So we're going to take both of those things into consideration as we take a look at this topic. So first, let's take a look at some statistics about low back pain and neck pain. Right, at any given time, somewhere around 25 to 30% of the people in the United States are experiencing low back pain. About 80% of the population is going to experience low back pain at some point in their lives. And roughly 25 to 30% of people are going to experience neck and shoulder pain. So why are these maladies so prevalent? Well, to be very honest, it's because we sit on our asses far too much. Most of us start our days sitting on our butts in our cars, lean forward, grabbing the steering wheel. Once we get to work, we spend most of our day sitting at a computer, slumped forward, typing and staring at screens. Now, of course, when we come home, we sit in these big, comfortable chairs. We kick our legs out in front of us, turn the TV on, and probably spend our time scrolling through our phones with our heads bent forward and our backs rounded. Now, the reason why all of this sitting causes so many problems, well, one, right, it increases the weight that your spine and your musculoskeletal structure has to support by about 90% versus standing. Right? It also takes the normal curves of your spine, which are there to support weight and do some shock absorption, and it kind of rounds them out. Most of us turn our bodies into this big C shape. So what we do is we typically slump forward, rounding out our lower backs. We lean our heads forward, our shoulders come up like this. All right? And again, that leads to all kinds of issues. And I think you as motorcyclists probably can identify with this. Right? What is the position that we do all of the time while we're out traveling? Yep, same kind of a thing, right? Our arms are out in front of us. Typically we throw our heads forward. Right? Especially if we're using that feet forward riding posture, which you'll find out in this video that I'm not a big fan of. So while sitting in a big easy chair can be nice while you're surrounded by those comfy cushions, when you stand up, well, that's when the problems begin, right? Because you're weakening your musculoskeletal system, you're creating muscular imbalances, and that again can lead to pain. Right? I saw this over and over and over again while I was practicing chiropractic. So the question then becomes, so what can we do about this? So what we're going to do is go through a few things that I have found have helped me, again, while I'm traveling out there for 50, 60 days in a row and riding that motorcycle. So number one, and probably the most important, is to keep your body fit, keep it strong, keep it flexible, and maintain good balance. Right now, I'm not going to dig into the details of all of these things, but if you do that, if you keep your body in good shape, well, you're way ahead of the game in staying comfortable and pain-free while you're traveling. Now, I have done some videos on my strength training routine, so I'll link to those in the description of this video, and also I'll do some other links to some good stretching videos that I have watched in the past. In particular, ones that talk about upper and lower cross syndrome. After keeping yourself fit, the second most important thing is going to be your riding posture. Now, what you want to do, at least what I think you want to do, is to maintain as neutral a riding posture. That is, keep your spine in line as much as possible. You don't want to slump, right? You want to be able to sit up straight, right? You want to keep your shoulders basically over your hips, and again, your head over your shoulders. You don't want it coming forward. You don't want those shoulders coming up. That's when you can end up having trouble. So now let's talk about that feet forward riding position that I mentioned I don't really care for. See, when you do that, that is when you tend to round your back, slump those shoulders, and tend to bring that head forward. So I try to avoid that position as much as possible. Right? In particular, you don't want to get on a bike, or at least I don't want to get onto the bike and travel long distances when, right, I am stuck in that one position. You guys probably saw my video of the Indian Scout for 2025, and I just really did not like that bike at all. In particular, the one thing that really bothered me was the riding posture. Right? Everybody is concerned about the saddle height, so Indian has slammed that saddle way down low, but that means that your feet have to go out. Right? So now your feet are out there, your arms are out here, and again, you're riding like this. Again, not a good position for long distance travel. For me, I have gravitated towards the neutral riding posture of an adventure bike. It lets me sit up straight. It lets me keep everything relaxed. And no, adventure bikes aren't made for just riding off-road. Right? Mine is a GT version, and it's basically a little bit taller sport touring bike, again, that allows me to maintain that good riding posture and stay relaxed. Along with having a good neutral riding position, you don't want to stay in that one position all day long. You want to shift things around a little bit. On the adventure bike, it is very easy to stand up on the bike, stretch out the hips, stretch out the knees, let the low back relax a little bit. Right? So that change in posture every so often, again, goes a long way. If you're on a cruiser, well, you can do a very similar thing, right? If you have floorboards, that is. If you have one of those bikes, again, like the Scout, that locks you out into that feet forward position, well, again, I'm not a fan, but if you have floorboards, then you can easily move around and change positions. You can spend most of your time, like I used to do when I rode my Victory Vision, with my feet back near the end of the floorboards so that I could keep my ankles and knees close to my hips and set straight up. And then if my knees and hips started getting a little tired, then I could move my feet out a little bit, right, and then give those things a break. But I wouldn't stay out there for long periods of time. I would just stay out there for 10, 15 minutes, let things loosen up, and then return to that normal, neutral riding posture. And again, for me, that worked really great. See, I don't hate cruisers. For the upper body, same kind of a thing. I want to stay in a pretty neutral riding position. I want my head and neck relaxed. I want my shoulders relaxed. I want my elbows down and relaxed. Now here I know that there are a lot of people who will tell you, no, you need to be up here in this riding position. And that may be true if you're doing a single track trail, or you're going through a great set of twisties and you need that control of the bike. But if you're just riding a long distance on the highway or even on the back roads, then staying relaxed is the best course of action. An adventure bike, and a cruiser for that matter, a big touring cruiser anyway, they typically have really wide bars on them, right? And so those bars will tend to have you raise the shoulders and elbows, as I was just talking about, right? And over time, again, that can put a lot of stress on the neck, on your traps, on your rhomboids, on your lateral deltoids, right? So you want to avoid that as much as possible. Again, you want to keep everything nice and loose and relaxed. So I am constantly reminding myself, especially at the beginning of a tour, to let those shoulders relax, let that neck relax. And literally, I will move my neck around like that and shake them out just to remind myself. And again, I just want to keep those shoulders down, keep them relaxed, and keep those elbows nice and relaxed. And that goes for the hands as well. I don't want to be gripping the bars. Again, if you're going through a set of twisties or whatever, sure, you're going to be working the clutch, you're going to be working the brake, you're going to be moving that bike, right? And you'll be using your hands a little bit more. But again, for just cruising down the highway, I try to keep everything nice and relaxed. In fact, I use the cruise control as much as possible. On my way to Alaska for 2024, I use the cruise control a lot. I would just set it on, I don't know, 55, 60 miles an hour, whatever the speed limit would handle, and then I would keep my hands as open and as relaxed as possible. I don't want to be doing this where I have my wrists curled down like this, and I don't want to be extending as well. I want to keep them as flat as possible on the bars, and again, just let them relax. So next up, let's talk about some modifications to the bike that you can do to help you stay comfortable. Well, first of all, at least for me, at 5'9", with kind of short arms, I usually have to make some modifications to the handlebar position in order to be able to stay nice and comfortable and loose. On my Yamaha Super Tenere, I had to raise the bars, move them back, and I had to do the same thing on my Triumph Tiger 1200 back there. Again, I raised the bars a little bit, put the bars back into their rearward riding position to get them back as far as I could. Now, honestly, on that bike, I probably could bring them back a little bit more, but I've been pretty good so far with, again, just learning to change my hand position up a little bit. Now, is there a point when back and up is too much? And again, I'm sorry to you ape hanger people, but yeah, if you get to the point where your hands are above your shoulders, well, that's getting to the point of being too much. See, when you do that, you're turning your shoulders in, you're going to impinge, right, your rotator cuff muscles, the tendons of your rotator cuff muscles, as well as the nerves that travel through that area. Again, and putting them up like this, well, that just makes things even worse, right? Put stress on the neck as well. So you want to keep your shoulders relaxed, you want to keep those hands underneath the level of your shoulders. At least, that's my opinion. And as a chiropractor, I can tell you that if you came to me and you were having low back or neck problems and I started talking to you about what you did and you told me you had a bike with big ape hangers on it, I would go, yeah, I think we need to change those. So next, let's talk about the saddle, because unfortunately, most stock saddles nowadays aren't very good. Manufacturers tend to skimp on those things. My Victory Vision had a great saddle on it. It was really comfortable, lasted for a number of years before I had to do something about it. So a big, expensive cruiser oftentimes will have a good saddle on it. Sometimes these adventure bikes, though, aren't not so much, right? My Yamaha Super Tenere was pretty bad, right? They let the saddle slope forward, so you feel like you're always falling off. You had to change the bumpers out to fix that and level the saddle out. And also for me, it was kind of hurting me on the backs of my legs. So I took it to an upholsterer and I had some custom modifications done that, again, made all the difference in the world. I was able to ride to Alaska and back with having no problems in the butt area on that trip. Now, of course, that was in 2017. Now in 2024, I went back to Alaska again, this time on my Triumph Tiger, and instead of doing some custom modifications, well, what I did was I bought a Wind Rider seat cover, right, which gives me just about, 3/8 of an inch of padding on there, and it really helped a great deal. I mean, it worked great the entire way. Also, it does let water and wind flow through the saddle, so you're not sitting in a puddle all of the time. But of course, there are many options that you can do for your saddle. You can get a sheepskin seat cover. You can get one of those blow-up air bladders. You can get a custom saddle, or you can get a cover like I have. It just really depends upon what is going to work for you, and you may have to try a few out before you get it right. I know on my Yamaha Super Tenere, that's what I had to do. I started off with a stock seat, then I went to a Saddleman seat, that didn't work very good, and finally went to, again, the custom alterations, which that was perfect and was well worth the money. Now, another thing that you might want to change out if you're on an adventure bike are your foot pegs, and a lot of people don't think about that. But having a nice, wide, supportive platform, again, makes all the difference. Again, I did that on my Yamaha Super Tenere. So far, the foot pegs on this Triumph Tiger seem to work very well, so I haven't changed them out yet. And speaking of keeping your feet comfortable, which I think is really important, if your feet start to hurt, well, it can make a ride pretty miserable. Not only are a good wide platform, like a change in foot pegs warranted, but also you want to pick a boot, right, that is going to be good and supportive, one that has a stiff sole on it. I know a lot of people like to ride in work boots, something like this, but this has a pretty flexible sole, and while it's good for walking around off the bike, well, again, it doesn't offer much support while you are riding. So rather than something like that, I suggest a boot like this. It's really stiff sole, really supportive, right? Helps to block some of that vibration that you're going to feel in the foot pegs on a long ride, and also, again, keeps that foot really supported, right? So it's not overly flexing while you ride. And I know there's always a trade-off between getting a good supportive boot, something that's going to give you a little bit of protection, and then being able to walk around and see an attraction on the side of the road. For me, this is the Forma-Terra Evo boot, and it's done a really good job of splitting that balance. I've been able to walk around quite a bit in this boot. So next, let's talk about gloves. Right, and of course this is a lot of personal preference when it comes to the kind of glove that you wear. For me, over the years, I have found that wearing a super heavy protective glove, right, while it's going to prevent some damage in a crash, right, it just isn't comfortable while I ride for me. In fact, typically, if I have a glove that has a lot of pre-curve in it, right, it doesn't let my thumb rest, right? My thumb is stuck in this one position, and that will just ache and go numb over the course of the day. So I have found that having a lighter, more flexible glove, again, is best for me. And what I've been wearing here lately is this. This is the deerskin glove from AEROSTICH. They have both deerskin and elkskin, and you can go check them out using the link that I have in the description of this video. But these are really great gloves, all leather, so they're going to give me some slide protection, but again, allow me to really just relax that hand, right, and be much more comfortable. Now, of course, there are lots of other things we could talk about as far as gear goes. Helmets, jackets, pants, right? Base layers, right? We could talk about all of those things in helping to keep you comfortable. But I've done those videos many times before, so I'm going to refer you to those so that this video doesn't get too long. So next, let's talk about getting enough rest while you are riding. And I have found this to be extremely important. If I'm pushing my body day after day after day, well, then I start to get tired. I start to make mistakes on the motorcycle, and I start to not feel so good. So for me, I want to limit my daily mileage to something that is going to allow me to feel good. And for me, that tends to be around the 300 mile mark. I can go out to 400 miles with no problem. But for most of the time, I want to keep it to that 300 or under range. Riding at that kind of range allows me to get in early, do some relaxing, right, have a great dinner, and get to bed at a reasonable hour. Now, also, I have found that it's extremely important to take some rest days while you're traveling, especially if you're doing, again, that 30 to 60 day kind of range. Going out for a couple of weeks and not having a day off, well, most of us can push through that kind of a thing. But for me, going on a long trip, well, that means that I want to take at least one day off every week, maybe even every 5 to 6 days. That just allows me to stay fresh. I can go do something in the local area where I'm staying, or I can do laundry that I typically have to do at least once a week, right? And I can just relax, right? Stay off the motorcycle, right? Read a book, do something, right, other than ride. It is essential, at least as far as I'm concerned, that you take some downtime. And the last thing that I'm going to mention here is hydration. Again, I've talked about this many times. I'll link to some of the videos that I've done in the past, but staying hydrated and staying on top of your hydration, not waiting until you get thirsty, not just doing it when you stop, right? You know, every hour, every 2 hours, right? Doing it while you're moving, well, that's extremely important. So those are the basic things that I have found work best for me in keeping myself feeling good while traveling. So are there other things that I left out that you think should be mentioned? Do you think I'm full of it? Do you think that throwing your legs out in front of you and having your arms up here is a good thing? Well, go ahead and yell at me, let me have it. And also, if you want some great gear, right, made right here in the USA, well, please check out that link in the description of the video to go out and look at what AEROSTICH has to offer. Those gloves, my Darien jacket, it's all great stuff. You can also check out my website at www.livingofftheslab.com. All right, guys. Keep riding safe out there, and of course, as always, keep squeezing your lemon and living a great life.